Well, here comes an album that I've been very excited about. Even though they've had a little bit of a spotty track record, I find when this band hits, they hit hard. And when they don't, I'm still left with some very enjoyable music. So let's dive in to find out what album we have in store today. Ancient Astronauts from Motorpsycho. So, Motorpsycho, I always have to be careful of how I say that because I always want to say motorpsycho or cycle or whatever. They're a Norwegian progressive rock band, and they actually got on the scene pretty early within the mid 90s. You know, they got their first album with Lobotomizer in 91, kind of hit the big scene with their third album of Timothy's Monster in 94. Since then, they've basically been putting out an album every year or so since then. So if you can believe it, and again, depending on what album you consider a studio release and which one you consider an EP, this one is their, 25th studio record? And this one is following off of the heels of Kingdom of Oblivion, the album that was released last year, which for me was a little bit of a dud, if I'm being perfectly honest. I've revisited it a couple of times last year and this year, and just doesn't really do anything for me. The thing that I love about Motorpsycho is how crystal clear the album is in terms of either a concept or just being unified. You know, like each album has a very distinct feel. It has a very unique approach to how they're going to deliver their music, whether it be more psychedelic, whether it be a little bit more jazzy, whether it be a little bit more acid rock, whether it be a little bit more heavy and metal-ish. Each one kind of has a crystal clear idea of where they want to go and what they're trying to do with the music. And that's one of the things that I love about Motorpsycho. You know, like they are very open to experimenting and trying and developing these sounds and spending a full album really honing their craft and really playing within that sandbox. And I just felt like Kingdom of Oblivion really wasn't that. Like, it was much more a collection of songs rather than an album. So with the Kingdom of Oblivion being a little bit more of a dud in my mind, coming into Ancient Astronauts, I was both excited but also cautiously optimistic in this one. And I was rewarded in one sense in that it does feel a lot more unified. Part of that is that it's only really 4 tracks, and each track is still kind of deviations a little bit of the mean of this more psychedelic side of the band. We've got a lot more influences of like the acid rock from the early to mid 70s with like Deep Purple, Uriah Heep, and Black Sabbath, but we're also getting a lot more of that psychedelic era as well, and a lot more of the krautrock as well, like a lot more of that Klaus Schultz. God, I'm going to get his name right one of these days. A lot of his work, a lot of like the crafts work that I've got behind me, but even like Grobschnitt and a lot of their stuff as well, and being a lot more atmospheric, a lot more ethereal in their approach. I mean, the second track of Flowers of Awareness, being the shortest track by steep margin, is 2 minutes and 13 seconds long, and it really is just this ethereal keyboard work. You know, it's very loose. There's a lot of space on this, and this is one of the things that I actually do appreciate on this album, is how much space is being taken up by this band and allowing for this ambient soundscapes to paint the picture. This allows the listener to really hone in and picture a lot of different things. You know, like I'm feeling just being swept off into the multitude of space that's being left within this album. And Ancient Astronauts is a very great nomiker for this space that they've left over. And the third track, Mona Lisa Azerial, opens up with this 2-minute ballad of, this overlay of the mellotron that for me is so drippingly beautiful. It's got this heavenly atmosphere that only a proper mellotron can deliver. And it's giving me reminiscence of like Starless from King Crimson, very throwback to the 70s prog aspects of that. But if you know Motorpsycho, they don't want to sit still. And the bulk of Mona Lisa / Azerial takes up the other kind of essence of this, which is that bombastic very jazzy, hard rock stuff, heavy in that sense. Like, it's crystal clear. And a lot of these tracks, specifically Mona Lisa, were taken from jam sessions that was kind of recorded last year. So a lot of it is improvisations, very similar to how King Crimson would approach albums like Lark's Tongue and Aspect and Starless and Bible Black, and being very like of the moment kind of music. You know, you never know where it's going to go. It's always changing on a dime. And, you know, I have to really tip my hat to Thomas Jarmy on the drums. His drumming work on this is absolutely stellar. Like, I haven't heard him be this bombastic and this tight in a very, very long time. And it's something that I know that he can do. Like, I'm getting flavors of the whole Hell Suite that they did, you know, about 5 or 6 years ago. It's very just tangible and immediate in that case. And the track closes again with another 2 minutes of this very ethereal, very crowdy, very soundscapey, just kind of send off. It's kind of like the calm after the storm of just kind of breathing the fresh air of being like, holy geez, what did we just experience? And again, it allows the listener to take that breath, to stretch their legs and just kind of think about all the things that have come before. And, you know, I kind of jumped right into the middle of the album. I didn't even talk about the album opener of The Ladder, and it's fine. Out of the 4 tracks, it's probably the most stereotypical Motorpsycho single off of it. You know, I'm getting lots of flavors of There Be Monsters and Eggplant, Still Life and Eggplant. It's much more rocking infused because it's the most kind of stereotypical, I guess, traditional rock track. It's my least favorite because I feel like they're not really taking quite as many risks on this. And I also like how this one's almost like a Frankenstein track in, you know, a lot of the music being placed out of all these jam sessions, and then afterwards they went back and added some lyrics. They added, you know, a little bit of through lines throughout the track, you know, the track being about 6 minutes and 40 seconds long, adding like some kind of a unifying force towards it. And in that sense, it's very interesting in how they approached their songwriting in this case to it. But I don't know, it doesn't quite work all that for me, mainly because they don't have that very unifying, very heavenly, very big moment that I was really hoping for, that they sometimes pull out of their hats with these more heavy-handed aspects of that. And part of this could be them coming into the studio not with those heavenly moments written for a track to be constructed around, and more coming into the studio and just jamming and seeing what comes. You know, it's a very different way of writing music, and in this case, it works, but it comes with a drawback. It comes with a little bit of a price. And that price is seen probably the most with the closing track, the big 22-minute epic of Chariots of the Sun, the Fantone on the Occasions of the Sunrise, themed for an imagined movie. And in some cases, I really, really like this track. You know, I really love how it's their longest instrumental piece. You know, there's no lyrics on it. There's no verses or choruses. It really is just 22 minutes of the music that's found around it. But unlike some of their big epics that they've done in the past, I don't feel as though there's this unifying nugget of gold that's kind of stringing the entire track along. It really is like a 22-minute jam session. And it takes some of the best parts of what I love about this album in that it's a lot more ethereal, a lot more experimental, as well as being a lot more jammy. And I mean, Theme for an Imagined Movie really is a great nomiker for this track, in that because it's this imagined movie, we don't really have characters or anything really solid. We don't have any real plots to go off of to create these themes for. You can't quite grab onto it. There's nothing really solid to hold a lot of these themes together. And in some cases, this makes a very enjoyable and very interesting and unique listen for the Motorpsycho catalog. But I'm also being reminded of a lot of the very somber and the very introspective tracks that we had from the Death-Defying Unicorn. And in some cases, and I use this pun intentionally, they are kind of treading water in that sense as much they did on Death Defying Unicorn. But unlike Death Defying Unicorn, where there was this sense of urgency, this sense of forebodingness, this dark presence that's always in the wind, wings waiting to strike, I'm not quite feeling it to the same extent here, specifically on that last track of Chariots of the Sun. So, yeah, the biggest drawback to this album, unfortunately, is the flip side to the best aspect of this, and that is the amount of space that the band is giving to a lot of these tracks. There's that lack of touchstones that I crave when I'm listening to these longer stretches of music. I have a feeling after about 6 months to a full year of digesting this album, because unlike, their previous album, Of the Kingdom of Oblivion, I feel drawn to this album. I feel that gravitational pull back to this album, and I will be re-listening to it throughout the year, just excavating the landscape, because there's a lot to dive into. This album, even though it's very impressionistic and very abstract, it is also very dense. So there's a lot to digest and a lot to really chew. In the end, I will say this album was still an absolute treat. Motorpsycho very rarely misses the mark, and they hit the mark exactly where they wanted it to be. And so in that case, this album is a success. Still, I have to say that Ancient Astronauts from Motorpsycho is still one that I would absolutely pick up in physical format. I wouldn't necessarily run out to do so, but this is one that I think I would eventually go out and own. Very similar to the Crucible. I didn't go out and immediately get it, but earlier this year I finally picked it up, as well as the All Is One. This is definitely an album that I want to spend a lot more time with. I felt a little bit of pressure on myself to get a review out, but that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm very, very interested to find out how I'm going to feel about this album at year's end. I think that's going to be the real test of this album. So yeah, that's what I've got for Ancient Astronauts from Motorpsycho. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And yeah, that's all I've got for you guys today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.